Before the pyramids rose above the Nile, before Rome ruled the Mediterranean, before Europe even learned to write its first alphabets, Africa was building kingdoms of gold, rivers of trade, sciences of the stars, and cities so advanced that medieval travelers believed they had wandered into another world. But this is not the Africa you learned in school. This is the Africa history tried to forget. Tonight we journey through thousands of years, across deserts, rainforests, highlands, and savannas, to rediscover the empires that shaped the world before the world ever understood their power. Welcome to the ancient and medieval African kingdoms, a complete overview. Africa is the oldest stage on which humanity ever walked. Our earliest ancestors carved tools in East Africa over 2 million years ago. They painted rock shelters in southern Africa, navigated great rivers in Central Africa, and developed farming in the Sahel long before many parts of the world knew how to cultivate crops. Yet, when people speak of ancient civilizations, they often begin with Greece or Rome. They forget that Africa had already been writing, building cities, and organizing states while Europe was still deep in its prehistoric past. To understand African kingdoms, we must understand the land itself. Africa is not a single story. It is a mosaic of climates. The Sahara, once green and full of lakes, slowly dried into a vast desert, but not before its ancient people migrated south, founding new cultures along the Niger River and across West Africa. The Nile Valley became the cradle of some of the world's earliest dynasties. The Indian Ocean carried monsoon winds that linked East Africa to Arabia, Persia, India, and later China. The Congo Basin's dense forests protected kingdoms for centuries, while the highlands of Ethiopia became a world of their own, untouched by invaders from most of human history. Africa's kingdoms were shaped by these landscapes. Empires rose where trade could flow, where rivers cut through land, and where gold, salt, iron, or fertile soil could build power. With that, our journey begins where history itself begins. Imagine the Nile at dawn. The river glows gold under the rising sun. Fishermen pull nets of tilapia from the water. Farmers guide cattle across fields fertilized by the annual flood. And beyond them, stone monuments rise into the sky, so massive, so precise that thousands of years later, humanity still wonders how they were built. This is Kemet, ancient Egypt, one of the world's first great civilizations. Egypt was not an isolated miracle. It emerged from African cultures along the Nile who mastered agriculture as early as 5000 BCE. When Upper and Lower Egypt united around 3100 BCE under Narmer, also known as Minas, a new age began. Pharaohs became not just kings, but god-kings. Writing systems like hieroglyphics recorded every grain shipment, every royal decree, every battle. And through this administration, Egypt grew into a structured, thriving state that endured for millennia. But Egypt's power was more than stone monuments. It was a center of science. Egyptians measured the stars, developed a 365-day calendar, crafted sophisticated medical treatments and performed complex surgeries. They transported obelisks weighing hundreds of tons through engineering methods modern architects still study today. Egypt also influenced and was influenced by its African neighbors. Nubia, south of Egypt, traded gold, ivory, cattle, and soldiers with the pharaohs. Over time, the relation shifted. First, Nubia served Egypt. Then Egypt served Nubia, and at one point the Nubian Kushite kings conquered all of Egypt.
Which brings us to our next kingdom, one history often hides. Far to the south of Egypt, beyond the first cataract of the Nile, lay the kingdom of Kush, an African powerhouse as old as Egypt itself. Its capital, Kerma, was once one of the largest urban centers in the world. Its artisans crafted pottery so advanced that archaeologists still marvel at the precision. For centuries, Kush and Egypt clashed. Armies crossed the desert, temples burned, and cities fell. But when Egypt's new kingdom collapsed around 1100 BCE, Kush rose again, stronger than before. Its new capital, Napata, became a religious center, and from here, something extraordinary happened. Around 750 BCE, the Kushite king Piye marched north and conquered Egypt itself. His dynasty, known as the 25th dynasty, ruled as the Black Pharaohs. Under their leadership, Egypt experienced a cultural renaissance. Temples were restored, art returned to old styles, and Nubian customs blended with Egyptian traditions, creating a vibrant Afro-Egyptian civilization. The Kushites ruled for nearly a century until they were pushed south by the invading Assyrians. But Kush did not collapse. Instead, the capital moved to Meroe, deep in the Sudanese savannah. Here, the Meroitic kings built a new empire, famous for its iron smelting, pyramids, and queens known as Kandakes, powerful warrior monarchs who fought Roman generals and negotiated peace with emperors. Kush thrived for another 700 years before slowly fading, but its legacy shaped all of Northeast Africa. Yet even as Kush declined, new powers were rising across the continent. On the North African coast, where Tunisia stands today, a city of merchants and sailors rose to dominate the Mediterranean. Carthage, founded around 814 BCE by Phoenician traders, became the heartbeat of a trading empire that stretched from Spain to Sicily to West Africa. To understand Carthage is to understand ambition. Its navy was unmatched. Its merchants controlled trade routes carrying gold, grain, timber, and precious goods. And its generals, like the legendary Hannibal Barca, became some of the greatest military minds in history. Hannibal's daring journey across the Alps with African war elephants remains one of the boldest campaigns ever undertaken. For years he brought Rome to its knees, but eventually Rome won, destroying Carthage in 146 BCE. Yet Carthage never disappeared completely. Its people, culture, and language endured, influencing North Africa long after Rome turned its cities to ash. And while Rome and Carthage clashed in the north, far to the east, another ancient African kingdom was rising, one that would survive long after Rome itself fell. High in the Ethiopian and Eritrean highlands, the kingdom of Axum emerged around the 1st century CE as a powerful trading empire. Its capital, Axum, became a crossroads linking Africa, Arabia, and India. Axum's kings minted their own coins, something only the most advanced states could afford to do. Its merchants traded ivory, gold, frankincense, iron, and exotic animals across the Red Sea. And its stelae, towering monuments carved from single stones, still stand as some of the most impressive structures in the ancient world. Around 330 CE, under King Izana, Axum became one of the first states on earth to adopt Christianity as a national religion, almost 1,000 years before many European kingdoms converted.
Axum also played a major role in world history when it conquered the kingdom of Himyar in Yemen and intervened in Arabian politics centuries before the rise of Islam. Though Axum eventually declined due to environmental changes and shifting trade routes, its culture lived on. It laid the foundations for the medieval Ethiopian Empire, which would one day resist foreign invasions and remain one of the only African nations never colonized. But Axum was not Africa's only medieval giant. West Africa was preparing to shine with unmatched brilliance. Many centuries ago, when the Sahara was still crossed by caravans of merchants, the Kingdom of Ghana, also known as Ouagadougou, rose along the Senegal and Niger rivers. It was not the Ghana of today. This Ghana was older, wealthier, and legendary. The secret of Ghana's power was gold. The forests of West Africa were full of it, and Ghana controlled the trade routes that carried gold north to North Africa and the Middle East. Arab travelers described Ghana's capital as a city of enormous wealth, where the king sat in a pavilion surrounded by gold ornaments, guarded by elite warriors. The Ghanaian rulers never revealed the sources of their gold mines, one of the best-kept secrets in medieval history. But their power came not only from wealth, but from organization. They protected merchants. They controlled trade. They managed diplomacy with nomads and desert tribes. By the 11th century, Ghana began to face pressure from new forces, Islamic movements, desert kingdoms, and internal conflicts. Slowly, the empire fragmented, but its legacy paved the way for two of Africa's greatest states. When Ghana fell, a new power rose from its ashes. The Mali Empire, founded by the Mandinka people, became the most powerful state in West Africa, and one of the richest empires the world has ever seen. Its founder, Sundiata Keita, is one of Africa's most celebrated heroes. Born disabled, exiled as a child, hunted by rival kingdoms, Sundiata returned as a warrior, united the Mandinka clans, and defeated the tyrant king Sumororo Kante in the epic Battle of Karina. His story is preserved in the Epic of Sundiata, recited by griots for over 700 years. Under Sundiata and his successors, Mali became a world superpower. And then came Mansa Musa. In the 14th century, Mansa Musa, perhaps the richest person in human history, ruled Mali at its height. His empire stretched across Senegal, Mali, Niger, Guinea, and beyond. Musa controlled gold mines that produced nearly half of the world's supply. When he traveled to Mecca on his famous pilgrimage,
He gave away so much gold that he caused inflation in Egypt for years. His capital, Timbuktu, became a center of learning. Scholars from across Africa and the Middle East came to study astronomy, mathematics, medicine, and law. The University of Songhai, still standing today, was one of the world's greatest medieval institutions. But power rarely lasts forever. After decades of succession struggles and invasions, Mali weakened. And from its ruins rose one final giant. Songhai began as a small kingdom on the Niger River, trading fish, kola nuts, and goods with traveling merchants. But under the leadership of kings like Sunni Ali and Askia Muhammad, Songhai grew into the largest empire in African history, larger even than Western Europe.
Sunni Ali was a conqueror, feared for his military genius. He expanded Songhai's territory across the Sahel, capturing Timbuktu and Gao. His successor, Askia Muhammad, transformed the empire into a sophisticated Islamic state with a structured government, tax system, and professional army. Songhai's cities flourished. Poets wrote in Arabic, judges debated law, merchants brought goods from Morocco, Egypt, and the Sudan. It was a golden age. But in 1591, Moroccan armies armed with gunpowder invaded. The Songhai cavalry, legendary for centuries, was no match for gunpowder. The empire collapsed, marking the end of West Africa's greatest medieval era. Yet while Africa's empires fell, Central and Southern Africa were producing wonders of their own. In southeastern Africa, between the Zambezi and Limpopo rivers, stands one of the most impressive archaeological sites on the continent, Great Zimbabwe. Built between the 11th and 15th centuries, Great Zimbabwe was a royal city of stone towers, high walls, and sophisticated architecture, all constructed without mortar. Its curved walls stretch more than 250 meters, some rising over 10 meters high. Great Zimbabwe controlled trade routes running to the Swahili Coast. Gold and ivory passed from inland mines to coastal ports where merchants from Arabia, Persia, India, and China exchanged goods. The wealth of Great Zimbabwe is reflected in the artifacts found there. Glass beads from Persia, Chinese porcelain, Arab coins. It was a cosmopolitan city, part of a global network. But around the 15th century, environmental pressures and political changes caused its decline. New states, such as the Mutapa Empire, rose in its wake. Along the eastern coast of Africa, from Somalia to Mozambique, a chain of independent, wealthy city-states flourished for over 1,000 years. Cities like Kilwa, Mombasa, Mogadishu, and Zanzibar became centers of international trade. The Swahili culture was a blend of African, Arab, Persian, and even Indian influences. The Swahili language, Kiswahili, remains one of Africa's most widely spoken tongues, a symbol of this rich heritage. Swahili merchants sailed monsoon winds across the Indian Ocean, carrying gold, ivory, iron, tortoiseshell, and spices. In return, they received textiles, ceramics, glassware, and luxury goods from Asia. Kilwa, in particular, was so wealthy that medieval explorers believed its ruler controlled all the gold of Africa. Its palace, Husuni Kubwa, was one of the largest stone structures in sub-Saharan Africa. These city-states
thrived until the arrival of Portuguese ships in the late 15th century, which disrupted local economies and eventually weakened the entire coast. From the deserts of Nubia to the forests of West Africa, from the mountains of Ethiopia to the stone cities of Zimbabwe, Africa's ancient and medieval kingdoms shaped global history in ways the world has too often forgotten. They built monuments that still stand today. They traded across oceans. They forged gold into crowns, iron into weapons, and ideas into legacies. They produced scholars, generals, queens, and saints. They created cities whose names have echoed for centuries. Africa is not a continent without history. It is a continent full of history, rich, complex, powerful, and enduring. Tonight, we have only scratched the surface, but the story of Africa continues. Its kingdoms rise not only from the sands of the past, but from the voices telling their stories today. This is Africa, the cradle of civilization, the mother of kingdoms, the heartbeat of human history.